In Venice, I found an extraordinary sculpture on sale in art shops. This wood carving, called the forcola, is in fact the key element of the gondola. It is the part that supports the oar. It allows the gondolier to navigate the canals. It is not the work of contemporary artists, but is created by craftsmen who, over the centuries, have shaped this essential piece of the gondola's steering system.
Questa qua la vuole un fiantino, non so capire che intaglio che vuole.
Gonfiare le pancette.
Sì, adesso non serve, dopo è seconda passata, cioè adesso ti può andare dritto. È seconda passata quando che segnerò qua, insomma, se che assa appena appena un piantino, perché non serve che sia sgonfo.
As I watched the creation of a forcola in the workshop of a Venetian craftsman, I began to think about the many similarities it has to the therapeutic education of the sick and to medical training in general. The wood used is hard and tough, but it doesn't split. To work it, the craftsman has to take into account its own fibers. The sick person often resists the instructions of the caregivers. The craftsman acts with precision and delicacy in order to respect the characteristics of the wood he has to transform. His tools must be sharp, so as not to do unnecessary damage to the block of walnut, pear, or cherry wood that he is making the forcola from. It's a long work of preparation, regular and measured, to achieve his goal. To rough-hew his material, the craftsman proceeds by little strokes, respecting the grain of the wood. This long, delicate work brings him closer to the inert wood he is dealing with. He seems to give it a soul and creates a relationship with his work. An apprentice can succeed in sculpting a forcola only if he has spent a long period learning, with patience and humility, from a master craftsman. On average, it takes a 3-year apprenticeship to acquire the skill to master every subtlety of the complex, twisted forms of this piece. Thanks to his sense of touch, the craftsman measures the effectiveness of every gesture in transforming the piece he is working on. It takes about 40 hours to carve a forcola to the specifications of the gondolier. The time needed to arrive at this result cannot be easily reduced. In medicine, on the other hand, the constant quest for efficiency tends to distance the caregiver more and more from taking care of the patient on a sensorial and psychological level. The pressure to make the training process ever faster by basing it on virtual exercises made possible by computer technology tends to discredit the concrete approach linked to feeling, touching, and observing the body of the patient. The forcola, the keystone of the gondola, allows the oar to be at the same time a rudder, an accelerator, and a brake. It's the part that undergoes all the pressure of the maneuver and enables the boat to progress through the water. The example of its fabrication reminds us of the importance of mastering the teaching of the concrete in order to make a sick person progress.
Avviarla, qui si voga, si dice quando incrocia un'altra gondola o c'è un canale stretto, qui va subito a sinistra, poi qui è quello che voga più spesso, voga normale. Un po' più in su, quando va dentro un canale stretto, allora non ci sta con il remo, allora fa un passo avanti e tiene il remo qua e quindi voga da qui a qui, insomma. E torna indietro. Qui ferma la gondola e gira a destra.
¡Ay! ¡Bajo de hongo! ¡Bajo de hongo! ¡Ay! ¡Premando, ay! ¡Ay!
The gondola was perfected in the 16th century by Venetian lumberjacks to transport wood from the mountains to make the pylons on which Venice is built. "11.5 meters long, with an asymmetrical flat bottom, the boat is made of up to 280 pieces of wood and glides through the water in perfect silence. The forcola is placed to starboard, on a level with the rower. It is made to measure, according to the build and style of the gondolier, and taking into account his manner of rowing and his stance on the gondola. Like the skill of the craftsman woodcarver who makes a forcola, the art of handling a gondola is based on movements which require several years of apprenticeship and long practice on the canals of Venice. In the same way, the therapeutic education of a sick person requires the caregiver to have a complete basic training, vast experience, and regular monitoring. The elegance of the gondola should not lead us to forget its fragility and its need for maintenance. On this gondola, whose structure with its ribs and veins evokes that of a human body, certain parts, due to the particular demands made upon them, suffer more than others. In the same way as, for example, the kidneys among those with hypertension, the legs among diabetics, the lungs among smokers, or the prostate among men over the age of 50. If one must teach therapeutic education to caregivers, it's because they lack something in their professional activity. If we have to educate the sick, it's to strengthen their fragility and make them more autonomous. At the origin of glass, there is sand, fire, and the skill of a glass craftsman who makes a paste out of it. Thanks to the energy given off by the furnace, as well as his own art, the master glassmaker is able to give that paste a form. From ordinary lifeless paste, the glass slowly becomes an object of aesthetic admiration, ready to fulfill a purpose that answers a human need. A cup, a vase, a glass, a jug, all objects useful in some social exchange. In its transparency and its solidity, the glass has been tamed by the creative force of man, who has made it into a powerful social link and a formidable medium of communication. The fabrication of certain very complex objects, like the elements of a Venetian chandelier, requires teamwork in a precisely regulated rhythm and synchronization, like the movements of a ballet. If the team of glass workers is not perfectly coordinated, sometimes to the very second, the work on the white-hot glass is not possible, and the complementary nature of their teamwork does not function. In the same way, in therapeutic education, the effectiveness of the procedure is closely linked to the coordination between the patient, his family, and the different members of the medical team. Training a sick person in therapeutic education allows him to recover a certain autonomy, a path towards others. As in the case of the piece of glass, It is through this transformation that he finds a social function. In this way, without knowing it, the master glassmaker acts a little like a responsible caregiver who trains his patient to treat himself and thus participate fully in a family, social, and professional life. Sickness isolates. When he makes a cup, a glass, or a carafe, the glassmaker is accomplishing an act which is both concrete and symbolic. His example opens the way to the patient to rediscover a path towards social life. That is why, incidentally, we never buy one glass alone. In the work of a craftsman, all the objects resemble each other, but each one carries its own distinctive mark, by which it differs slightly from others. It is this tiny difference which constitutes its value and richness. It is the same thing with long-term care of patients with chronic illnesses, where the treatment must always be adapted to the characteristics of each patient and must never be standardized.
È la mano stessa che cambia, lui anche se fa 100-200 bicchieri, una piccola imperfezione tra uno e l'altro c'è sempre, e questo è anche un pregio, perché chi ci chiede i bicchieri perfetti, noi diamo i nominativi delle aziende che lavorano a macchina, noi non... così è.
Alors, à votre bonne santé.
Merci, merci pour le verre, merci pour l'invitation.
Un piccolo brindisi.
Sì. Salute.
Santé.
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 Sì.
Santé, Dominique.
Merci pour tout.
Tiziana.
Bene. E buon augurio che poi si è realizzato.
Sì, sì.
Perché lei parla italiano con l'accento veneziano?
On voit les dessins du verre. Regarde.
Mais
vrai,
ces
c'est-
dessins sont...
Ils sont faits à Venise.
C'est extraordinaire là.
Voilà.
Venice, a city unique in the world, celebrated for the beauty of its palaces, its churches, its museums, its canals, its gondolas. But beyond the treasures which attract our eye, what is it that makes the magic of Venice? It is the convergence of rhythms, of water and wind, of sun and shadow, of squares and bridges, the arcades of palaces and houses, the tolling of bells, the lapping of waves, the boats going up and down the canals in all directions. All these rhythms make up Venice. Venice and its masterpieces distract us from these rhythms, which are its vital elements. This inexpressible something that pervades us and creates in us this special feeling of well-being that Venice gives us. Living organisms are also places of convergence of these vital rhythms, all of them different. Health is perhaps when they are all working in harmony. When sickness breaks in and causes a sense of malaise, the balance is broken. Therapeutic intervention then imposes new rhythms, which are often foreign to the life of the patient. One of the great difficulties in the therapeutic education of the sick person comes from the absence of rhythm in the action of the caregiver. Boring and repetitive explanations without any direct link with the needs of the patient cause a reciprocal loss of attention between caregiver and patient. Routine takes over, and the rhythm becomes frozen by habit. Another difficulty arises when the rhythm of the medical practitioner takes over from the rhythm of the patient, who already has a problem accepting his illness and applying his treatment. The experience of Venice opens us up to the inexpressible, to the importance and the power of all these rhythms. In medicine, taking account of the different rhythms of each individual allows us to reinforce the appropriateness of the care given to the patient. It is what we call the practitioner's sense. By its nature, the rhythm must lend itself to permanent changes in function of needs. The father teaching his son to row reassures him by his presence. He seems to tell him, "Go ahead and make mistakes. It doesn't matter. I am here."
Dai, bravo, guarda avanti. Tirare su più il remo, visto che ti va troppo in acqua, recuperi io come prima.
The art of teaching is a quest for a common rhythm. One cannot learn and change without a protected space. One cannot teach without an authentic commitment to remain at the side of the patient. In the pedagogical process, it's the concrete and the relationship which take priority over theory and models. All teaching worthy of the name needs a space and time for absorption, where the pupil or the patient can slowly assimilate the many notions learned. In an epoch where education is stifled by information, this fundamentally important space has a tendency to disappear. To enter into the rhythms and the force of the lived experience is perhaps to try to approach something of the inexpressible. Behind the things that are not said lie parallel universes that are deeply personal to each individual. In the inexpressible, there is also a part of reality, that which the caregiver seeks to understand and that which the patient seeks, however clumsily, to express. In the absence of rhythm, nothing happens. Without rhythm, there is neither effective teaching nor effective treatment. Without rhythm, there is no life, no growth, no change. The seasons of life are a succession of tensions and transformations which have their own rhythm.